So thank you all so much. We'd love to take questions from you guys. You're all the best. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, the people who helped organize the event and make it possible. Yes, Miss, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm a child welfare advocate, and I'm grieving for the migrant children and the families. If you had a magic wand and you were president, what would you do?
Repeat the question.
Oh, so yeah, I'm happy to repeat the question. So she works in child welfare, and she's grieving for the kids we're separating from their families at the border. And as a parent, I am too. I mean, I have young kids, and I just can't imagine the trauma that we're inflicting on these families. And like, there have been professionals who've said that this trauma is going to affect them maybe forever. And you can imagine, like, you know, how a young child would react to being separated from their parents, or even how the parent would react to being separated from their child in that way. And it's to me, it's actually a sign of just how inhuman our government bureaucracy has become. Like, it makes people capable of things that in any other circumstance we would never dream of. Like, if you were to take any of these government employees and be like, hey, here's a family, you want to take a kid away from the parents? They'd be like, what on earth would I ever do that? Like, I would never do that. I'm a human being, I've got a family. But then you put them in these situations where it's like, hey, policy is you got to do this, and I got to, you know, treat these people like they're somehow not human. And then your job is on the line, and you know, we have this bureaucracy where no one's really responsible. Like, if you were to look around and say, who's actually responsible for this? There's no accountability anywhere. And it's what a guy named Philip Howard put it this way, and I thought this was really apt. He said, we're dealing with like the rule of nobody. You know, it's like everyone's looking around being like, I don't know who the heck's fault that is. Like, we have this giant machine of hundreds of thousands of employees, but like no one really knows. And so like that's one of the things we have to try and make our government more human. And a lot of that is trying to give the people on the ground more humanity, so they can make better decisions that aren't like, you know, things that now are like a shame or a stain on the country. And so as president, I would go in and say, look, these facilities are unacceptable, and we're going to need to overhaul and modernize them. And if we're not able to detain people in a humane way, then we should not be detaining them, like, you know, in these circumstances at all. You know, it's like we have to try and humanize it. But one of the things I will say too, as a parent, it's like I'm aware, and certainly it's not as like extreme as like just taking kids away from their parents, but there are hundreds of thousands of American children in circumstances right now that all of us would find completely tragic if we were exposed to it on a regular basis. And that's certainly true in like the health and nutrition side, and like the fact that so many of them have like parents who are struggling, or, you know, broken homes. But then even when they come into our school system now is this machine where so many kids come in and they feel like they don't belong and they're deficient. And one of my boys is autistic, and I imagine if he were in like a school that did not support you know, like different neurological makeups, like, man, like, let's just say like my kid would not be having a good time. It's like my autistic son is exactly the kind of kid that other kids would prey on, honestly. And that's happening, I know, in schools around the country right now. That there's not much of a sense of support of neurodiversity, because you have one teacher who's responsible for like 30 kids. So you're not like, you know, your job is just to try and maintain order in your classroom, and if there's one kid that's just getting up and wandering around, then that kid's going to end up in like the special, you know, needs class very, very quickly. So there are so many things that we need to do for the kids in this country. Certainly the people who are coming as migrants for a better life, and I'm the son of immigrants. Like, I understand the impulse to come here for a better life, and we should be treating them in a much more human fashion. But then they're also like, we just need to be treating kids across the board in a way that we'd actually be proud of as a country. I'll come this way and make sure I don't get like a bias toward that side. Yeah. Actually, take the mic. I like giving the mic to people. All right.
Thank you. So your candidacy, your campaign, your ideas threaten the establishment, big money, big corporate interests, everything that they all stand for. And if you look at MSNBC at the first debate, you look at all their coverage leading up to that debate, you can see that they are doing everything that they...
I'm not a paranoid sort, but it was a little weird.
They're going to try to marginalize it.
A little bit odd, where I was like, oh, like, my face isn't on that graphic.
It happens so many... You can see it on, like, people document it on Twitter. Like, there are many instances. What are you going to do to not get burnied this time around?
Yeah.
All right. Bernie.
You know, I'm sort of like, obviously at the time I was not, but I'm sort of glad the first debate worked out the way it did, because I really think now people have a sense like, oh shit, if we like stick it to Yang too obviously, then we'll end up like trending on Twitter and like seeming like jerks and you know, the rest of it. And I'm so glad that actually rotates networks, because we've dealt with CNN, and CNN seems very fair to us. Now, the premise of the question, too, is like, hey, the corporate overlords don't like Yang. And some of the corporate overlords do not seem to like Yang, it's true. but there are, one of the misconceptions about this platform is that there are actually a significant proportion of corporate leaders who've caught on to how messed up things are and are actually open to my solution set. So, as some examples of people that have donated to the campaign, endorsed me in various ways, you know, like 100 techies and tech CEOs, and I've talked all the time about, hey, we need to like get our fair share from tech so that people can thrive. And some of the techies are like, yeah, that's right. You know, they're not like total assholes where it's like, you want to take some of my gold coins. Like, you know, they're like, you know, if you ask techies, it's like, hey, you automating away the jobs? They're like, yeah, I'm doing that. And it's like, how do you feel about it? Not very good. It's like, hey, would you like to help like keep society together? It's like, yes, I would. No one's ever asked me that question before, you know? So so it's not as a reflexive, it's like, oh, some people are against it. And a couple of very, very senior finance titans in particular have come out and said capitalism is not working for most Americans anymore. So Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, has brought me in to talk to dozens of CEOs and CFOs, just essentially presenting my book in PowerPoint format, being like, yo, this stuff's not working, it's just gonna get much worse. Yeah. So, and then Jamie Dimon came out and said, we should declare a national emergency around the failure of economic system to create opportunity for people, and we should declare a negative income tax, essentially guaranteeing an income level in the United States of America. The CEO of JP Morgan Chase said this. Does that remind you of anything, like guaranteed income level? You know what I mean? Yeah, the freedom dividend. And what was interesting is like, so Jamie has me in to talk to a bunch of people, and then like, like some people did not like my facts. There was like, it's like, oh, I don't like these facts. And then Jamie was like, oh, Jamie, I remember, I was like, over here, Jamie was like, you need to read his book and like hear the man out. So Jamie sees it. Another guy named Ray Dalio, the head of Bridgewater, also just came out and said national emergency, economy not working. He has not come out and declared for negative income tax, but there are like some very, very sophisticated senior business leaders who see everything I'm saying as essentially the way to go. So it's more complex than just that all the companies like want to fight Yang. Like though, when you talk about the media overlords and whatnot, like those characters, it does seem like at least some of them do not love me. That's true. Yeah, the political establishment too, and this is where it gets interesting, is that right now, so you talk about, the DNC, generally speaking, has been very fair to me. And there actually is this growing awakening, even in like the hardcore DNC, that I can appeal to people that it's like a different crowd. So right now, at least, they're a little bit like, ooh, like, you know, maybe he can like make our tent bigger, something along those lines. If the campaign gains enough steam, then I think they'd be open to more, because like they've also interacted with me, and this is one of the things I've been a little bit off-put by in some ways, is that like the folks in the DNC and like people, certainly in the early states, they actually do what you would expect normal people to do, which is they actually say, it's like, hey, let me sit down with you, let me talk to you. Do you seem like a reasonable person? Do you seem like you're doing this for the right reasons? Do you seem like someone I could work with? And when they conclude the answer is yes, then like, okay, I like you now, like let's work together. That's what I would consider fairly normal behavior. And I'm happy to say that's actually happened at various levels of the DNC. When that does not happen, when there's some kind of like knee-jerk resistance, which has been the case in some quarters of like the really hardcore media establishment and some other places, where some of these interviews, I was like, I'd be sitting there being like, why are you like, you know, it's like why are you being such a tool? You know, it's like really bewildering. And obviously, if you're me, you can kind of tell the difference when someone's just like, oh, I want to get to know you, or like, hey, like I'm gonna like try and kneecap you for like, you know, no particular reason. And I'm happy to say that in the DNC, it's been much more the former, where they're actually they're actually interested in like me, the campaign, the ideas.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So yeah, DNC so far, thumbs up. Here, you have the mic too.
Alright. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure being here, for sure. I just want to ask, like, let's say you actually become president, and hopefully that's the case. What America do you envision 10 years after you've been hypothetically elected? Have you made any big changes? And if so, what are the major changes, and how do they positively affect the future of America?
So we all know my first act, I talk about it all the time. But the great thing is if you back into a world where Andrew Yang is our president in 2021, we all know that I won because people want that dividend. Right? You know, it's like, wait, people catch on and be like, wait a minute, we can do that? Like, oh yeah, you can. It's like that guy. So then I come into power, and the Democrats are just so pumped to have beaten Donald Trump. They're like, yeah, let's do it. You know, it's like when I come and say, let's pass a dividend, the Democrats will be like, yes. And then Republicans and conservatives will look up and say, wait a minute, that's good for my constituents, it's good for rural areas, it's good for places that have been devastated by automation. It's in many ways like a wealth transfer away from some like conventionally Democratic strongholds into their states oftentimes. And we don't need 81% of Congress, you just need 51%. And as soon as you can get more money to people's hands, then what happens? Their heads come up, they're like, ooh, I like this. They look around and be like, wow, the government did something I actually like for a change. And then you can get people focused on saying, hey, now that we did that, maybe we can invest in infrastructure in a way that we'd be excited about that also happens to like address climate change. Maybe we can change the measurements to be things that would actually matter to you. And so to me, like the big kickstart lever is getting the economic boot off of people's throats, getting more resource into people's hands. And one of the things I say on the conservative side is that cash is very hard to demonize. If you go and say, hey, they're trying to give you health care, they're going to like get death panels and take your doctors away and like da-da-da-da-da, then people get scared. But if you go, hey, the Asian man wants to give you money and the money's going to hurt you, it's like, it's actually kind of a hard story. You know, it's like, money doesn't hurt me. You know, like, and so you can get like the majority you need to actually pass some things. And so if you imagine what happens 10 years after I take office, the goal is to reverse this mindset of scarcity that has swept our country and made it so that we're like turning on each other, can't solve big problems, like, you know, don't have sensible even exchanges. And then you get the, like, if people feel like their future is assured, that we're in a society of relative abundance, that if you're different from me, that's not a problem for me, that like we actually provide for everyone, that would be the major change, because that change would be so fundamental. And that's one of the great fears I have right now, is that you can see the scarcity, it's creeping up, it's weighing us down, and it's like increasing xenophobia, it's increasing tribalism, it's increasing all these things that are very, very nasty. And so if we can reverse that, that would be a legacy I would be very, very proud to share with you all. Sure, yeah, sir.
So I've got a question that is regarding the freedom dividend. And so I've heard a number of things you've talked about, and one of the bigger arguments is the inflation, what happens with price inflation, and I've heard your argument many times against that. The one part that I don't fully understand, most of your examples are about like, you know, restaurants or like going to a movie theater or something like that. And so a competition will keep the prices in line. My one problem is something like apartments, like Portland. Yes, Portland and many, many other cities have a housing crisis, and it doesn't seem like there's enough competition. So it seems like there would have to be another way to keep apartment prices in line.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard the discussion around inflation, there are three sources of inflation that are making us miserable: housing, education, and healthcare. You can throw childcare in there as like a hybrid of education. And housing is the stickiest one in large part. So education and healthcare, you can see the causes very clearly. College has gotten 2.5 times more expensive because of administrative excess. And people feel like they don't have a choice but to send their kids. So it's like, what? It costs $60,000 now? Okay, I guess we're gonna go into crazy debt. And then, you know, like that's the unfortunate circumstance with education. Healthcare is because there's this giant private insurance industry that's siphoning money in along with a bunch of other companies. And then housing is the toughest one. So I've looked into the causes of housing, and a lot of it is that there's a whole combination. So I know Portland, the housing's gotten more and more expensive, and Portland's almost joining these ranks of like the hyper expensive cities. So right now the hyper expensive cities are like San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Boston. And then now Portland has historically been relatively affordable relative to those places, and now it's starting to like join that curve, and it's like, and so what would happen in other circumstances? You might, for example, build affordable housing, but then affordable housing, there are a lot of local regs that restrict that, and some of the reasons for that are good, some of them are not good. And so if you put the freedom dividend in place, the first thing is that it actually makes for more flexible and competitive housing arrangements. So let's say right now you lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with like a couple of roommates. You get a freedom dividend, and then the landlord comes and is like, hey, I'm not going to stick it to you and like, you know, like ratchet up the rent by 50, 60%. Because I know you got it, because I know you guys are giving me $3,000 a month. and so then you look around and say, okay, well that sucks. And then you look around and see, well, what are the other 2-bedroom apartments looking at? And let's say that they join that landlord and try to stick it to you too. So then the goal, I believe, would be that that you get the 3 of you together and say, okay, our housing options are bad, but what if we got 2 more people, and then we got $5,000 a month, and then we found some home that's like a fixer-upper, and then like that's actually a move that we could make that we might not have been able to make before, particularly because the income's actually portable. Because right now, the other restriction you have is that you have to live within commuting distance of whatever job you're doing, and that's one reason why costs spike in certain geographical areas. Whereas the freedom dividend is very, very portable, so you would see like a bit more mobility to different economic zones. I'll tell you, like I live in New York City, and there's so many people there whose backs are being broken by housing that if they were getting $1,000 a month, they would like, you know, go to the woods. in a good way. It's like they would be like, oh, I'm going to work on the novel with my horse and then my dog. And like, you know, there'd be mobility in both directions that way. So that's part of it, is like greater portability and mobility. But the other part of it is you need to actually try and change the incentives for certain sorts of housing development in certain regions. Now, part of that is very much local. So in the federal government, if you went in and said, hey, guess what, your zoning reg's no good, like that would actually be deeply problematic. Like it might even be illegal, constitutional. It's like no one wants the federal government coming in and being like, you know, it's time to throw a skyscraper up in your neighborhood because we think it's a good idea. So it's not an easy fix, but the main thing is that by putting buying power into our hands, we're actually harder to exploit. We're harder to push around than if we don't have flexibility or buying power that moves with us wherever we go.
Last question, guys.
Good point.
He'll be around for right now.
Oh, I'll give it to you. Come on up.
Thank you. I want to say thank you for being here. I haven't read your book, but I just bought it. But I want to let you know that as somebody that studies economics and actually researches the data, like much like yourself, that is the reason I am here, because you're the only one that actually speaks to the people, and you have a great understanding of how economics work, not only in the data but also in the abstract. And so I just wanted to say that. But my question is, can you describe your VP and what qualities do you look for in a VP? Because I think you're going to make it pretty high up there, and we want to know.
Oh, nice. Oh, VP question. Not a plant. No, it's like, I was kidding. One of the fun things about running for president is I've actually spent a bit of time with most of the other candidates at this point. I even have some of their cell phone numbers. We like text each other stuff. No, it's true. That's what happens when you're stuck in that pen I was talking about. You know, it's like they're right next to each other and be like, hey, like, you know, like, do you want to trade cell phone numbers? So it does happen. So first and foremost, there are a couple things I'd want for a VP. The main thing is that I'd have to have like a very, very deep, trusting working relationship with them. Because the last thing you want is a VP that he's like there being like, hey. You know, it's like they have to have the vision of the trickle-up economy at heart and say, like, we just have to do whatever it takes to get the job done. I will say I have a disposition towards a woman because I just think that organizations and companies and societies like just work better if you have male and female leadership. And one thing I've said, you guys have probably heard, is like if you have too many men alone for too long, we kind of become idiots. So so this isn't like a fixed condition. Like obviously you pick who you think would be best, but if it was like anywhere close and like I thought I could have a female running mate, I would want that. It'd have to be someone that was committed to the vision, that I had a really great relationship with, and that I thought that if God forbid something happened to me, that I'd be very excited for them to be president. There are like a few people that during this campaign, my interactions with them have led me to see why they're running for president, like they're running for the right reasons, and that I can see why people are supporting them. And so I'm not going to say like it's going to be this person, but there are several people I would feel very comfortable working with in my administration. And I will say, I mean, the plan is to win, but like as you can tell, like I'm committed just to solving these problems. And if I think I can solve these problems in a way that does not include me being the president, like for example, being someone else's running mate and beating Donald Trump, like I would do that. I'm not some megalomaniac where it's like, oh, if I'm not president, then fuck this. Like, it's like obviously, like I'll do whatever it takes to contribute and win. I will say, Washington D.C. is not my favorite place, and so I would not move there for a job that was not. I'm not like, oh, if I could just get like an okay like D.C. job, like this would be great. Like I have no interest in like a DC job that I don't think is going to help move the needle to solve these problems in a significant way. But certainly, if like there's a nominee that I like and respect, and they say, hey Andrew, like I want you to actually solve these problems. American t-shirt. How you doing, bro? Not a plant. No, we might as well be.
Hi Andrew, I'm Michael, I'm the 2019 Veteran for America Fellow, so thank you for all you've done. My questions are, I did some math, there's about 500,000 Detroiters that Freedom Dividend would put $500 million into their hands every month. I don't think people realize what that's going to do, how that's going to impact them, like how you sell that vision to people in Detroit, people in all the big cities and all across America. Training camp ended Friday. I started work yesterday from Michigan. I went to University of Michigan, and I'm big.
Go Wolverines! I'm trying to say go blue. Is it go blue? So Michael, you'll be happy to know that one of the primary messages for tomorrow night is trying to translate what $1,000 a month would mean in a community like Detroit. If your math is correct, it would be $461 million a month right here in Detroit. Now the reason I know that number is because I'm obviously going to use it tomorrow night, because I'm not like some, nutbar who can do that math in my head like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually try to make it easy for the American people to translate what $1,000 a month would mean in their community. And so when you watch that tomorrow night, that's going to be one of the messages I hit. So you're a very smart man. And it's not a plant, again. I really did sound like you were just setting me up for tomorrow's debate. Miss.
Hi, Andrew. Very happy to be here. I voted for Donald Trump. I have to confess to you. I'm here to help you, but I'm very excited to make you run. But I do have a serious question. In addition to, handing out $1,000 to everyone, what kind of specific job opportunities do you think you could create for Americans to, have some jobs to hold on to? Because this $1,000 dividend also gave us some of us, a false feeling that we are not going to get any jobs. So that's a depressing part you need to address to get more people excited. Real job. How do you, create more jobs for us?
I totally agree. What's your name?
Way.
So, Wei, your question is shared by many, many people. And I think the biggest misconception about the freedom dividend is that it's somehow going to discourage work. So when people have gotten money in different situations, there are only two groups that have worked fewer hours. New moms who spent more time with their children, and teenagers who spent more time in school and graduated at higher levels. If you look at a place like Detroit, if you were getting $461 million into everyone's hands That would create jobs right here in Tech Town in this building. It would create jobs at the local pizzeria. It would create jobs at the garage that would all of a sudden have people actually repairing their cars. So instead of somehow keeping people from working, you would actually end up creating work in consumer economies, and it would also recognize the kind of work that my wife does in caregiving. I'm now giving $1,000 a month to a guy named Kyle Christensen in Iowa who's caring for his ailing mom who has cancer. And so that kind of work does not get picked up in our economy in a meaningful way. But I could not agree more with the fact that Americans want to work, Americans like to work, and that work is categorically a positive thing for most people. In the absence of work, things actually get very, very dark and very negative very quickly, particularly for men. Women tend to be more adaptable to a lack of work. Women end up doing something positive in their community. They go back to school at higher levels. Men, we volunteer less than employed men, even though we have more time. Our video game and computer usage shoots up. Our alcohol consumption goes up. Our gambling consumption goes up. We generally become antisocial and sort of idiotic, and it just proceeds from there. This is surprising no one in this room. Just facts. I mean, this is data. So we need to try and create as many avenues forward for people to find productive jobs as fast as possible. That's actually the essence of my campaign. That's what the Freedom Dividend is about. But I have about a half a dozen other proposals that help create work in different ways. So I'm very, very pro-work, and it's the single biggest, I think, misconception around the Freedom Dividend.
Andrew, you got time for one more.
All right, one more. Alvin.
Thank you. So I love your ideas, but I'm also a realist in the sense that our government has mechanisms, particularly in Washington. So if you realize in recent history, Congress is required to implement a lot of policy, and Congress has not been very friendly to progressive type candidates, and even presidents once they're elected. As you can see, Obama had a lot of really good ideas, had a very long time executing them at the federal level. So what can you do to give us confidence that once you're actually elected, you'll be able to implement ideas into policy?
It's a great question, and I think one reason why this campaign is so energizing to folks. How many of you are attending a political event for the first time in your lives? Alvin, check that out. 25% of Americans are politically disengaged. That is, they just don't care about politics, nothing is relevant to them. And this campaign is energizing and exciting that group of people in a very big way. And that's vital not just to us winning, but also to getting things done. So I want you to play out this vision with me, and we can make this vision happen. Andrew Yang, fall debates, like, okay, interesting, just keeps growing, goes through the entire winter, and then we show up in New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, we shock the world because you know what the third party of New Hampshire is? Libertarians. Libertarians all live in New Hampshire. I don't know if you know that about New Hampshire. And New Hampshire's primary is an open primary, so you do not need to be a registered Democrat to vote in that primary. So let's say the Libertarians come out for Yang, a lot of the Republicans come out for Yang, because what's the Republican primary going to look like? It's going to be Donald Trump stomping on William Weld, or something like that. Like if you're a Republican, you're like, there's not much action over there, so let me go vote for Yang, because I know that'll make a difference. So then, Andrew Yang finishes top 3 in New Hampshire, and then no matter who the other top 2 are, I'm going to be the headline. I'm going to be like, how did Andrew Yang get 1, 2, or 3 in New Hampshire? And then we have a whole week of writing those headlines to Nevada, to South Carolina, and then to Super Tuesday, so that I win. And so this is a beautiful vision. And now I want you to imagine my getting to Capitol Hill. The Democrats are so pumped. They were like, we took a bet on Andrew Yang and it worked. We beat Donald Trump. And Andrew Yang wants to give everyone money that's going to be great for people and families and children. Let's do it. All right, so the Democrats will be on board. But here's the kicker. The Republicans are going to look at this and say, wait a minute. He just wants to give people in rural areas money, in red states money, places that are getting blasted by automation money. And cash is a very hard thing to demonize. If I come and say, hey, I'm going to give you health care then the Republicans will be like, he wants to take your doctors away, it's going to hurt you. In this one, it'll be like, I want to give you money. And then they're going to be like, the money he's going to give you is going to hurt you. You know, it's kind of ridiculous. And this is a bipartisan idea. Alaska is a deep red conservative state, and they've had a dividend for almost 40 years because the Republican governor who passed it said, look, who would you rather get the oil money, the government who's just going to screw it up, or you, the people of Alaska? Then the Alaskan people were like, us. And he's like, I thought so. So there are going to be a bunch of Republicans who look at this and say, I like the dividend. The dividend's not big government, it's small government. It's pro-people, it's pro-freedom, it's the freedom dividend. And I don't need 80% of Congress, I just need 60% or 51%. And so you get the Democrats on board, but you get enough of the Republicans on board, and then after we get the money out, then Americans will be like, holy crap, the government did something right for a change. I never thought this would happen, but I got my freedom dividend. Did you get your freedom dividend? Like, what is that about? And then all of a sudden, we can shake up the calculus. Because Alvin, you're right. Our government right now is polarized and deadlocked, and we can't get anything done. It makes, how many of you are fearful of the fact that our government now is going to seize up and never be able to solve the big problems? It's all of us, right? You're looking up saying, so it's going to take someone like me to shake things up. Someone who's not ideological, someone who's bipartisan, someone whose big flagship idea is something that people on both sides of the aisle can get excited about. I am one of the best hopes for us actually breaking the gridlock in Washington.